I'm joined this week by Tarek Fatah. Tarek is a writer, a broadcaster, a secularist, and a liberal activist. I probably could think of a couple other buzzwords. You want to throw some more in there for me?
Me, a bad Muslim.
And I was going to let you say it. I didn't want to say it myself.
Bad as in good, you see.
Bad as in good Muslim. All right. Well, I'm really looking forward to talking to you because, interestingly, the way I've done this show, every few weeks, suddenly I get a burst of tweets, people saying I have to sit down with this person or that person. And about 2 weeks ago, suddenly I was getting a slew of tweets that I have to talk to you. And we had already connected. So I'm glad that we're able to take some time and do this.
Well, I'm glad my network worked, because as you know, I'm paid by Mossad and the Indian intelligence. And I told them, you got to go after David and get the two of us connected.
Yeah. People think I'm paid by the Mossad too. I'm pretty sure I would have better furniture than all the IKEA stuff that I have.
You better keep that between the two of us.
Don't worry, we're not recording this. First off, I love what's going on behind you with all those books. You're obviously a well-read man.
Well, that's a bad thing, if you are a Muslim, because it breaks down a whole lot of barriers that are set around you when you're born in a Muslim household, especially in the last, I would say, 60, 70 years. Century before that, right up to 50 was, I would say, the golden years of Islam. Everybody wanted to open up the books. And then was the Islamic State of Pakistan, followed by, preceded by the Saudi kingdom, but they didn't have money then. And ever since then, the very notion of a Muslim critiquing Islam is heresy. The whole tradition of the 10th century Muslim atheist or rationalist is so gone, so far away, that if you tell educated Muslims today, even postgraduate students of Islam, even non-Muslim, that the culture of Islam was full of negating God and then embracing him after negating, because the essence of our declaration of faith is that there is no God. Before we say there is a God, we say, there is no God, but God. And, there's a but in between. It's philosophically what drew a lot of Arab and Persian atheists into Islam, because it permitted them to do this questioning without the fear of death.
Yeah, so I want to focus there for just a second, because I've seen you do talks on this and write about this. This idea that sort of the free thinking that we now don't associate with Islam is actually a pretty new occurrence. You're saying in the last 60 or 70 years. Can you kind of distill that a little bit?
Look, right up to the 1800s, we had a particularly dark era in which, let's put it this way, 90% of Muslims were illiterate. Still today, 90% can't speak Arabic. 50% today are illiterate. So you can imagine the year 1800, where what the Sultan said was Islam. Now, if you go back 1800 till the turn of the first millennium, the year 1000, preceding that are 200 years where literacy is booming and people are thinking in their own languages. What happens is the next 800 years, nobody knows anything about Islam, which makes them okay Muslims, because they've not read some of the very harsh racist rhetoric that comes, that Ibn Taymiyyah says, well, if you're a non-Arab Muslim, and if you say you're equal to an Arab, you're sinning. Nobody knew that. So people were Muslims, and they adapted to the Indonesian or Indian or the Kazakh or the Turkish customs. And then came the colonial era.
Yeah. Wait, let's pause for just 1 second. So I think what you would say, and this is where I would be okay with certain religion, is that at that point, until the colonial era, it was pretty much okay, right? Because people weren't taking things very literally. They sort of didn't understand the doctrine in a certain way, and they then took the customs of wherever they lived, be it Indonesia, Turkey, wherever else, and then that's how they lived their lives.
Absolutely. And then came the Brits and the French and the Portuguese, who started translating the Islamic classics into their own languages. The fascinating thing is even the Hindu Upanishads were first got translated by a Muslim Mughal prince, who, by the way, later got beheaded, but he took it to Persian and French and then English. So a whole lot of these things are happening in the 17th, 18th century. But when the Europeans come, all these classics get translated into French and English primarily, some in Spanish as well. And that translation then come back to the elites of the Muslim world. So the Egyptians or the Indians, and basically these were the two sources of Islam, Egypt and India, or Iran to a certain degree. And suddenly you've got half-baked scholars who find the easiest thing. Let me give you an example. The Quran is still not in its chronological order. So the first word of the Quran is not the first of the Quran. And when the last word of the Quran, which is quite fascinating, says, God says, today I've completed my religion for you, that's it. 99% of Sharia says, oh, he's completed it, let me improve on it.
Right.
And it's not in the Quran, it's not the last word. And so you pull your hair and say, well, who did this stuff? But you can't ask that question because the opposing party is upset at two things. First is, how dare this guy who just looks like a normal fellow ask me this question? And then the anger comes when he does, or very rarely she, does realize, oh my God, he's talking sense. Why doesn't the Quran start with the first revelation of God, which says, read and write? God doesn't say, preach and pray.
Right.
He doesn't even talk about worshiping him in the first word. He's saying, go read and write because I created you from a single, So it's fascinating, but we are, I think, in a worse situation today than ever before.
Well, that's why I've spent so much time talking about this. And, one of the mantras of this show is trying to separate people from ideas, because there are obviously hundreds of millions of good Muslims that practice whatever religious thing they want, that don't want to hurt anybody and want to be as part of Western society as much as anybody else and are liberal and pro.
Eastern society. For example, what would a villager in, say, South India, what does he have to do with anything? The poor guy is basically saying, I wish there was rain, Oh my God, my rice crop's going down.
Yeah.
Doesn't give a damn what Osama bin Laden is saying or ISIS is saying. However, the leadership of the Muslim community around the world are not tied in to that farmer. They're tied into this notion that life on Earth is temporary. Earth is a transit lounge. We've got to blow it up and finally catch a transit flight to paradise. It's now a death cult. And if you cannot accept that, there's no solution.
Okay, so I know that a lot of people, when they hear you say that, they're going to say, well, there's plenty of bad stuff in the Old Testament. There's plenty of bad stuff in the New Testament. If you looked at them side by side, the Quran might be the least violent of all of them. So how do you rationalize that?
Okay, listen. For the Christian, the good Christians on earth, they want to make this world paradise. Okay, Jesus is going to come make it beautiful.
Right.
There is concepts of afterlife, but none ask for the destruction of human civilization. I've never met a Jew who says, I got to do something about this rotten stuff. We've invented insulin. I got to kill that guy.
Right.
I mean, we have people in Pakistan, a PhD scholar just last week, defying the laws of gravity, saying that this is satanic. These are not people who are working class, ordinary, janitors or something. This guy is a PhD in physics.
Yeah.
We had a Nobel Prize winner who used to believe in an amulet that would float around in his car, and he would pray around that. He said, oh, that's science. This piece of paper is going to protect me.
What do you make of someone that can be in the science realm and then so discount science for the unprovable, for the leap of faith, for whatever religion it is?
Because most of our scientists are not scientists because they had a curiosity to discover science. Their parents told them, if you do mathematics and engineering, you'll get a better job. I mean, very straightforward. No one wants to be a philosopher ever. Everyone You notice why the Muslim Brotherhood is filled with engineers. There are no sociology graduates in the Muslim Brotherhood. They're all engineers or doctors. That's the gateway to a good income, an upper middle class. They're not interested in treating people. There's no desire. I wish I could heal, paralysis. No.
Yeah. So when you talk about the leadership of the Muslim world, at least since, let's say for the last 70 years or so, I assume you're mostly talking about sort of the Sunni Wahhabism that's coming out of Saudi Arabia. Is that really the leadership right now of the sort of extreme side of this?
Let me give you an example. Who are the people who created the first Islamic state, which is Pakistan? They're not the Sunni Muslims. They were the Ismailis. They were the Ahmadi Muslims, which the West today thinks, the Ismailis and the Ahmadi Muslims, they're very liberal. It was the Ahmadis who said, let us create a country where we could experiment. The Aga Khan himself was sitting in India, divided Bengal between East Bengal and West Bengal in 1905. These guys, each one of them, no matter what the sect is, had the view of the 12th century to be brought into the 21st. They thought it would rearrange the digits. Boom, we'll pray to God. God's going to intervene. Camels come forth, swords, stones. These white people, Christian, Jews, and atheists, we'll deal with them. It didn't turn out that way. Pakistan was created. Imagine the territory that is today Pakistan, which the West avoids to discuss at its own peril.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted Pakistan there. The Pakistan that people wanted changed its name to Bangladesh in 1971. That's a secular country. That government is fighting the Islamists, and no one seems to put together anything because I'll tell you something. I think West and Israel stop at the Iran-Iraq four-letter words. Anything east of that is multi-headed gods, fire dragons, exotic Goa, Bali. Nobody is concerned about Pakistan's 200 nukes. Imagine. I think there is a failure of the European and North American intellectual academic class to say, what is the primary problem here?
Yeah, so I love that you're bringing that up because I just watched your TED Talk yesterday. I watched it on YouTube. And I thought it was really fascinating. And I know that you're a student of history, and not only a student of history, but you literally lived this history. You were born, I think, in 1949. So you were born, basically, you were a baby as Pakistan was a baby. You were born in Pakistan. But in your TED Talk,
a very different place.
A very different place. So I want to talk about a little bit about your childhood. But first, nobody seems to know about this part of the world. You know, all the time on this show, and if you watch CNN or Fox or whatever, they talk about the Middle East all the time. People understand British partition plan.
Something, and you might not like it, or your viewers.
No, please.
We are just not pretty enough like fair Turks, Arabs. We're brown-skinned. I tell you, east of the Himalayas, the exotica starts. The Chinaman, the dragon, the Hindu god, the Sufi saint standing on one leg on top of a mountaintop. Orientalism has destroyed the ability of the Western liberal. That's why the Christian churches know us better. The Catholic Church knows us better. The evangelicals know us better because they come there and they work. I went to Catholic school. I have immense debt to pay to my fathers who never made me feel I was not a Muslim, and in deep poverty of a family, never made me feel I was poor. I realized 20 years later that my principal, Father Mascarenhas, God, I don't know where he is, he paid my school fees out of his own pocket.
Wow.
Now, that an American diplomat wouldn't know. The Americans primarily created Pakistan with the British, primarily the British, I would say, as a buffer zone between the USSR and India. Neither white academics want to know that, nor the Indians know that. Pakistan has never existed and will not exist. It's an acronym.
Yeah, so wait, let's just stop there because it's a lot of information, and because I know people don't focus on this part of the world, I try to give it to them in the simplest terms. So basically, the British controlled that area. And then in 1947, then India became a sovereign nation, right? And Pakistan became a sovereign nation. But what you're saying is there was no sort of justification for Pakistan to exist as a nation state, sort of.
In a minute, I'll explain that.
Yeah.
When Berlin fell to the Red Army, Churchill panicked. They had tried to reach, to get Germany to surrender. The Wehrmacht was heading west to surrender to the advancing American-British armies. But the Red Army had suffered enough. They took Berlin and took half of Germany. Do you know, on the day Berlin fell, Churchill ordered an instant inquiry of British interests in the Indian Ocean and in British India. He wasn't worried about Europe. That had gone from his hand. He was concerned because the Soviets had entered Iran. They had set up a state there, a Kurdish and an Azeri state. He asked the Indian National Congress, so Mr. Gandhi and Nehru, will you allow us to set up a base in northwest India to counter the Red Army? The Indians said no. They were pretty close with the communists. And then he went to the Muslim League. These guys said, no problem.
Right.
How much money will you give? And it's after 1945, within 2 years of the Holocaust, that an entire new country comes. India gets cut off from the Soviet Union. Iran gets cut off from India. And the Americans set up a base in northern Pakistan from where Gary Powers flew and was then shot down of the Soviet Union. Now, that connection in the West is not made, that all of this is so intertwined that unless we weed out all of this and say, oh my God, this was a mistake that we made. And somehow we got to stop giving billions of dollars every year to the Pakistanis, who then kill Americans.
Right. So okay. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there. So let's try to unpack it a little bit. So first off, I hope this question isn't somehow offensive or something. But so you, because you were born in Pakistan, do you consider yourself Pakistani or Indian? Because I think this is your point, is that it makes no difference in a weird way.
I think there is no such thing as a Pakistan. It's an acronym.
Yeah.
There are only two countries that are created on the basis of an acronym, which means they're based on a certain value. The United States of America, which is USA, and Pakistan, which is Punjab, Afghan, Balochistan, and Sindh. Put this together. Mm-hmm. One is based on its constitution, the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, the everything that today the rest of the world aspires to. You guys did it in 1767, right?
Right.
Am I right on that?
You are. That was good. You got it.
We guys came up and said, I am to kill you. Infidel. They started on the theory, a racist notion of the two-nation theory, which says Hindus are inferior than Muslims. We have a right as a Muslim minority to have an apartheid state under which 1,000 million Hindus will be ruled by, say, 100 million Muslims. That's outrageous. Something as offensive as that cannot sustain or create goodwill or good people. And evidence shows that even the best of Pakistani cannot be weaned out of his hatred of the Jew, the Hindu, whether these people are living in the United States for 50 years or another 100 years. That couple that killed people in San Bernardino, you don't have that many Arab terrorists in the United States, as many as you have Pakistani born. Even Major Nidal, the day he killed, he was wearing a Pakistani attire.
Yeah.
You look at the New York bomber. Why is it that Daniel Pearl has to be killed in Pakistan by a Pakistani born in the United Kingdom from one of the most prestigious institutes in the world? It's that frame of mind that says, I am supreme. I'm not an Arab, I'm not a Turk, I'm not an Indian, I'm nothing. I'm an empty bag. You can fill it with hate, seal it tight. Wherever you keep it, I'll contaminate that place. Is that bad?
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is because this state was not born out of an ethnicity in and of itself, it's sort of a void and then can be filled with whatever ideology fits. And actually, that then does make sense to the strange relationship that the United States has with Pakistan, where we know that they're doing a lot of bad stuff. We know that terrorism is coming out of there. We're drone striking people there. They were hiding bin Laden. It's unclear if we knew. We went into the attack there. So the relationship is insanely complex, right?
It is. The Americans, poor Americans, I'll tell you.
Poor Americans? Nobody ever says poor Americans.
They're naive. They've been suckered into for the last 70 years. They take your money and kill you, and you give them some more. Because inherent in the American attitude, I'm a lefty. I have been at enough demonstrations out to the American consulate saying, hey, George Bush got to go. But for crying out loud, your value is based on goodness, of the essential equality of human beings. You destroyed slavery. You don't have a problem admitting. You don't have a problem admitting that you were once anti-Semitic, but you have created some of the most outspoken Jewish people. The blacks in your country today, my goodness, the son of a Kenyan immigrant becomes a president of a country? It's not going to happen in Pakistan in a million years. He's black. Can you imagine a black president of China? Americans don't know what is so essentially moral about their existence. And they use that. There are many things bad. Leave that aside.
Sure.
But you get fooled by some of the most crooked, evil people who consider themselves as holy.